to BLK Creative Filings free web class, What You Must Know Before Starting a Nonprofit and or a 501c3 organization. I'm doing this because I received probably like 8 phone calls within the last 3 weeks about starting a nonprofit. Some people just want to know how do they do it. Some people are frustrated with the timeline or the process they're currently in. And some people are not sure if they can even raise money without being a 501c3. So this class is really meant to answer those questions. Although this is pre-recorded, please don't hesitate to reach out and ask questions. At the end of the slide, I give you my email address. Also, you can find me on Facebook, facebook.com/ BLK Creative Filings. So let's get started. My name is Jackie. I am an attorney here in New York. I've been one for 7 years now. I'm the owner of BLK Creative Filings. We help people start businesses quickly and we help them save money so they can get started doing what they have to do. I am a graduate of Michigan State University College of Law, where I was a valedictorian speaker. I have been a business owner since 2005. However, my earliest memories is selling Kool-Aid off my step. um, I am from Jamaica, Queens, New York. I'm also a really big sportsman. I love the Mets, the Nets, Giants. So it's been a rough sports period for me as a fan, but we'll get through it. So in this web class, hopefully you will learn what you must know before starting a nonprofit and or a 501c3 organization. And here's what I want you to walk away with. What is a nonprofit and a 501c3 organization? What are the pros and cons of starting a 501c3? And what are some alternatives of raising money without being a 501c3? I mean, a lot of times, some people just don't have the resources to do it because it can be really expensive. But there are ways to get around it, and I'm going to go over it with you. What is a nonprofit? The purpose of a nonprofit organization is generally to improve the quality of life for others at a community, local, state, and national level. Common types of nonprofit organizations are public charities, foundations, social advocacy groups, trade organizations. These organizations are not dedicated to private or financial gain, but to the advancement of public interests. A big one that for me is a big part of my life is the Public Broadcasting Company, so PBS. Is because growing up, that's all I watch. So, and they're a nonprofit and they're a 501c3 because they're really not a business. Their whole goal is for the public interest for education and to encourage learning among everyone. I mean, early childhood to adulthood. And I think I have used PBS so much in my life. So, and they work basically off of donations that are tax deductible. So think of like PBS, things of that nature. What is a 501c3 organization? Now, this can be different from a nonprofit. You can be a nonprofit and not have a 501c3 classification from the IRS. So generally, 501c3 is really just a code that the IRS uses. It allows for tax exemption of income that the nonprofit may receive, especially with regards to public charities, private foundations, things of that nature. It allows for anyone who donates to these 501c3 organizations to use it as a tax deduction to lower their tax liability. So it's kind of a way to encourage people to donate past it just being a good cause because it actually financially helps them. And some people, we like to believe that we all do things for the good. Some people just do things to help their wallet. And honestly, who cares? I mean, just get the money. That's the more important part because that money's going to help you move your idea, move your charitable cause forward. But that 501c3 is a big helpful thing for people to raise money. So with 501c3, you can't just be any type of nonprofit. You kind of have to be doing stuff for charitable purposes. And here are some examples. So religious, charitable, scientific, testing for public safety, literary, education, fostering of national and international amateur sports, prevention of cruelty to animals and children, you know, things that help society for the most part, like those nonprofits that help people, do things. It sounds horrible, but kind of help, like the ones that give out coats in the winter. Um, I'm thinking of Galore Tech or Urban Galore Tech that my friend Matt has. He has a whole nonprofit that is really geared towards encouraging uh, children of color to really get into STEM programs. He builds like all these different coding and they do podcasting. That's an example of doing it for the greater good. Pros of starting a nonprofit. Well, there's quite a few, but these are just the general ones I can think of. One, it kind of separates your personal assets from the organization. And this is what I mean. God forbid your organization gets sued and they lose a lawsuit. You know, worst case scenario, the organization goes, bankruptcy. But it's not going to take away from your personal assets. So just because the organization has liabilities, they're not going to come after your house and your car and your bank account. So it creates that shield, which I think is really wonderful. Um, Also, tax exempt status. So generally speaking, any income you do receive or any money donations you do get, that is not income. That is not tax by the government. As long as you're cycling it back into the organization. So the whole goal is that that money should be helping your purpose or helping your cause move forward. So that means that money needs to be cycled back into your organization. Also, it's a public and private incentive to help out, like we had talked about earlier. You know, of course, a lot of times we do want to give money. However, the incentive is helpful. If you can donate and it helps out, a cause that you care about, plus it can save you some money on your tax liability at the end of the year, you know, do it. It kind of encourages that. And also grant eligibility. And let me tell you, the amount of grants there are for nonprofits is endless. And if you're in Queens or if you're in Nassau County, I'll speak for Queens. Definitely check out um, more information about discretionary funding. I think I'm going to do a separate video on it, but I know that Councilwomen Sylvina Powers Brooks and Natasha Williams, along with the Black Resource Network, did a really good informative video on how to apply for that funding. So definitely take a look at that. But a nonprofit gets you in a better position to receive those funds. Now, here are the cons of starting a nonprofit, and there's a few. I still encourage people to do it. I think it's needed. Sometimes they are an extension of the government. When the government can't do something, nonprofits help out. However, there are cons, and we're going to go over it. So first, time and money to start. It can be complicated and expensive to get started. And reason why it's expensive is because a lot of times you have to hire an attorney. And I know people are like, why do they charge so much to do these nonprofits? Well, it's kind of a 16-step process to do. And I'm actually going to teach a course on I'm going to walk people through how to do their own nonprofits. Um, but I'm not saying it's difficult, it's labor intensive and it can be expensive. And even the fees themselves can be expensive. So I think to file incorporation papers here in New York, it's $75, but you'd want to do it expedited because if you wait on New York State to file your stuff regular time, it'll be like 2 months. But if you do it expedited, you can get it done, generally speaking, the next day. And then you have to pay for the 501c3 application, and that really depends on which application you're doing. If you're doing the easy one, or if you're doing a more difficult one, the cost varies. However, the easy one, I think the fee for the IRS as of April 2022, I think is $250. But it's definitely, it's more complicated than people think. Also, you have to stay within like strict compliance. Like you have to follow the rules really well. There's a lot of activities that can jeopardize a nonprofit status as a 501c3. And here are just a few. Private benefit. And I will say this, it's more like when you see the founder or you see a board director taking advantage of the resources that should be for the nonprofit, for the cause. An example I would like to think of right now, allegedly, is right now the controversy is with Black Lives Matter. I'm not sure if they're a 501c3 or if they're a regular business. However, it's been really interesting to see where the funds go. So all these donations that people have been sending, it seems like maybe some of the founders have been using that income allegedly for personal enjoyment of buying homes that are $6 million or overpaying for homes. That's an example. That could be an example. I'm not saying it is. You can't lobby. So when I say lobbying, I mean a lot of, there's law firms that their whole job is to push an agenda in different legislatures to get certain laws passed or not to get certain laws passed. You can't do that. Political campaign activity. That's a big no-no. You really can't. You can't endorse a candidate. You can't openly, at least a nonprofit can't endorse it. Right now, if you're in New York, hopefully you've heard about, I guess, our ex-lieutenant governor, Brian Benjamin. Recently, he was arrested on federal charges of campaign finance fraud because he gave money to a nonprofit that was led by a political ally, which seemed really close to, political. And it's almost like the nonprofit gave him money, but they hid it, and like they kind of allegedly seem to have lied about it, where the money came from. You don't want to get in that situation because it jeopardizes your status. Unrelated business income. Again, the money should be going back into the nonprofit. The nonprofit really shouldn't be running a bodega if it's for, you shouldn't be running a store, probably, if it doesn't really help your interests. Also, not filing your annual reporting obligation. Like, there's a lot of filing you have to do. And you want to submit it on time and make sure that you're within regulation. Public scrutiny is another reason. People are always going to question your intentions or question how you're using your money. Are you doing this only for money? Like, people are going to always question it. And you really can't have profits. Like, it's not a business where the purpose of starting it is to get as much money as possible doing something you love doing. The purpose is that all this money should be going back into your organization to further your charitable cause. However, this does not mean you can't be paid a salary. You can. And, that's always up for discussion on what the salary should be, what's reasonable. But, you can have a salary. It just can't be ridiculous. But those are the cons. Those are the difficulties. But the main one, to be honest with you, is starting it. Starting is just hard. It's very, very hard. But it's not impossible. You can do it. But that seems to be the hurdle that I have run into with people with regards to conversations with 501c3 status. All right, so here's some alternatives. So the question is, can you raise donations for a cause that are a tax deduction and tax exempt without 501c3 status? And the answer is yes, absolutely. And how? You work with a fiscal sponsor. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I have a list. So fiscal sponsor, it may sound weird, but it is what it is. So what is this type of sponsor? So instead of starting your own nonprofit, you can work with one that already has its 501c3 status for a public charity, and you can have a formal arrangement with them. So you can go after those grants and those donations, um, and it still be tax deduction for your donor. Your donors pretty much will give the money to your sponsor, um, and your sponsor will note those funds for your project. So generally speaking, the sponsor passes the money to you, keeping a fixed amount, typically 5 to 10% for administrative services. Um, and this is where I'm going to stop and pause and give my own thoughts about it. I think they're really great. I think these type of conduits are wonderful. Just don't get taken advantage of for, how much should be taking, how much they're taking. I think anything above 10% is a little bit much. And you want to make sure whatever work you're doing that you retain ownership. That just because they're sponsoring it doesn't mean that they own it. Those are things that I think about, but this is a really good avenue. You'll definitely sign a contract, and you gotta have to figure out what your structure is going to be with them. Now here's the exception. So although the donations that are received are a tax deduction for those donors, when this sponsor gives you the money, that money is not going, again, because you're not a nonprofit, you're not a 501c3, the money that you get, that is income and that is taxable. So whenever you get it, you're going to have to file the proper paperwork. And for a lot of people, it's going to be a regular 1099. It's going to be a Schedule C on a 1040. It's not difficult, but don't be mistaken that that money that they give you isn't tax deductible, because it is, or it isn't taxable because it is income, because you are not yet a 501c3. Example: Jackie wants to raise money through grants to save Black dogs. I really just like dogs. I love Black dogs. But she doesn't have the resources to form a 501c3. Jackie partners with Save All Dogs Inc., which is a 501c3, to use their organization to apply for the grant. When the grant is approved, the funds will be sent to Save All Dogs Inc. They will keep 10% and give the remainder to Jackie for her cause. Pretty much, I'd be accepting the funds and it's saying, I would be accepting the funds in exchange for a 10% fee of the grant. And that money I receive is still going to be income. Like, although I'm using it towards a charitable cause, I do have to do it as income as well. Because I had someone who reached out to me, and I felt bad. I felt like they were kind of being taken advantage of by one of these sponsors, and generally they're good. However, they had her under the thought process that the money she was receiving, she didn't have to pay taxes on. And it was so not the case. Like, it really wasn't. I think what they did wasn't very ethical because they didn't explain it well. But there are a lot of good ones. There's really a lot of good ones, but just be careful about them. Make sure you understand the structure. Make sure you understand the partnership, the agreement, what is included in that administrative fee. But this is a really good opportunity for artists. I've seen a lot of artists work with these sponsors so they can apply for these grants to do this great work in a neighborhood. Look for those type of situations, because those are wonderful. Questions. So I know that this is not a live class. However, if you do have any questions, you can always find me on Facebook. It's facebook.com/BLK Creative Filings. Instagram is excuse me. Instagram is BLK Creative Filings. You can also find me on YouTube. It's BLK Creative Filings. Again, I am Jackie. I'm an attorney. Um, Feel free to send me an email if you have questions. I try to have this be an open dialogue. I'm only doing this pre-recorded because I was short on time. But if you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out.